is we not want to know if you're going to win, we want to know why you should. And as a result, what we're going to do for the rest of this election season, send us an email at coalitionradioshow@gmail.com, and we will make time for you on the air as long as you're running a legitimate candidacy. And what all I mean by that is you've met the basic requirements to be on the ballot. At that point, it is not up to me, it is up to the electorate to decide whether or not you're going to be elected to higher office. So let's take a break right now. Joining us is, for the very first time on the coalition, Matt Brown, Democratic candidate for governor. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you.
Have a seat, relax. This is I've actually been looking forward to this for quite some time. We haven't met. I think you might have thought you were going to come in to talk to Paul, but I'm Pat Ford. I'm chairman of the Libertarian Party here in the great state of Rhode Island. I am you and I probably have very different outlooks on government, but I'm intrigued not only by your approach, but also your platform and also your challenge to what constitutes the status quo here in Rhode Island. Of course, that's our governor. So with that, we've got a half hour or so. Let's just get right down to it. Tell our guests, what was the epiphany? What was the hallelujah moment? You were living out of state. You were active in a not-for-profit. You decided to come back for Rhode Island and run for governor. You're running against an incumbent. What motivated you?
Yeah, actually, I moved back 6 years ago. So,
okay.
So no, I grew up in Rhode Island, and I went away for college. I came home and helped to start City Year, youth service program.
Phenomenally successful.
Yeah, it's been terrific and changed a lot of lives and changed communities here, and has now grown to 28 cities across the country. Went away to law school for 3 years, came back to Rhode Island, was Secretary of State, and then went to Washington for 4 years. And co-founded Global Zero, that works to reduce nuclear arms around the world, and then moved back 6 years ago and have been here raising our daughter and her son and coaching Little League, and so decided a few months back to run for governor.
Why? As the book says, what's your why?
The why is that we have a system that has failed us, and I think if you went back a few decades in the state and in this country, you'd have different communities that would say, this system has failed me. Communities of color, low-income communities. I think increasingly, people across the state of all backgrounds, all different circumstances, feel like this system has failed us. And it's failed us economically. It's a system that has driven an extreme economic inequality, so the money and the economic power and the opportunities just keep flowing up and up and up to large corporations, wealthiest people at the top, and everyone else struggles because of the simple fact that the costs of everything that people depend on, their health care, their cost of college, the cost of housing, all of the child care, all of the costs that people need to spend to get through their lives have gone up and up and up over the last 4 decades. They continue to go up, and what people earn, their wages, their income, has essentially been flat. Little declines, little stagnation here and there, but essentially it's been a flat line. And so those two facts together, that everything costs more and people don't make more, means that life has gotten harder for people, and it continues to get harder for people while there's more and more money and people see it going to those at the top. And that is not by accident. That is a system that's been created. It's a system that is backed by our government. And the reason it continues, even though it harms most people, and this is a democracy, so you'd think we would do things to help most people, the reason we don't is because of the campaign contributions that flow from those top wealthy people and the corporate interests to politicians, so that government works for them, that small group at the top, and they're not working for everyone else. And we see that in so many ways across the state, and that's what needs to change.
As a libertarian, my response to that, of course, is simply eliminate a lot of the roles of government, and you'll, by definition, then eliminate the greed factor in trying to rise to those levels of power. But here in Rhode Island, it seems like cronyism, corporate welfare, is in particularly egregious and a particular challenge to the standard of living, as you point out. Why do you think that is? What is it in our culture? Is this something new with the current administration? Corporate welfare has proven to be a failure in just about every metric of actually fulfilling its quote-unquote stated goal, which is to raise economic activity.
I completely agree. I think it is the dominant system in the country, but I do think that the current governor here in the state is right in the center of that system. I think she believes in it. She's taken it to another level here with the corporate giveaways as her primary agenda. And that's just taking money from taxpayers, many of whom don't have two dimes to rub together, and giving it to massive corporations that have millions or billions of dollars in profit. And meanwhile, what does that say to the small business owner who's been busting his or her back, maybe for a family's been doing it for generations, to create a business, to make a living, and all of a sudden they see the governor take taxpayer money and pick individual huge corporations from out of state and just give them millions of dollars. And especially when they then find out that those corporations have given, and their executives have given contributions to that governor. So, you look at the frack gas plant. I mean, that idea, that would harm that community. I've been up there. That would destroy the way of life. It would destroy the forest there. The Boy Scouts have facilities up there. People have been enjoying that for generations in Rhode Island. It would pump out all kinds of toxins. People who live there would have to move because of the pollution. It would make it impossible to meet our carbon reduction goals. So it would be bad for that community, bad for the state, bad for our children, bad for the environment, bad for the future. The only two that frack gas plant would be good for is the corporation that would make a mint off the people of this state, and Governor Raimondo, who took campaign contributions from the executives there. For the rest of us, it's a bad idea. And so that's where the problem comes in with this system. And so that's why people, I think, across the state, excuse me, there is a broad feeling across, I think, many different backgrounds and many different communities that the system has failed us and we need to change it. And this relationship of the corporate money and those in power being served while the rest of the people are being ignored is at the heart of that desire for change. And I've spent my whole life working in public service, working for communities, going back to City Year through Global Zero, nonprofit public service work. I know what it takes to change a system, and it's what I want to do here and make sure that the system economically works for all the people and not just those at the top, but that we can also tackle our other problems, our environmental problems, the cost of healthcare, the quality of our school buildings and our schools and the education going on inside. So we got a lot of problems, and we got to change the system if we're going to fix those problems.
To me, and I'd be interested if you agree or disagree. First of all, there's a studied willful ignorance, if you will, by a legislature that is clearly willing to enable this governor in terms of just a fundamental misunderstanding of economics. I'll point out, there were two battles that we've been engaged in this show for a number of years, and first and foremost is the stadium. And this to me is reflective of the failure of principle and really the lack of understanding of economics at the Commerce Corporation. You build these government-sponsored monopolies, because they are effectively either a monopoly, say for example in the case of Twin River, or they will work as a monopoly in the case of the Pawtucket Baseball Stadium. You effectively tax people to support those organizations by taking property taxes, in this case, out of the Pawtucket economy. And then you effectively create a draw, a government-subsidized draw on economic activity, I believe forcing locally owned businesses into the incredible position of their tax dollars going to effectively subsidize their competition for the entertainment dollar.
Yeah, the whole idea of corporate subsidies, corporate welfare, as you call it, corporate socialism, which is just taking money from the people and giving it to corporations, is a failed theory. It doesn't work. It's bad for communities. It's bad for the people of the state, and it's not real economic development. Real economic development would be changing the fundamental things that we need to fix in this state so that people and corporations and businesses, that the small businesses and others, they want to start here and they can grow here because it's a good place to do business, not because they're being given a handout.
Right.
And so that means we've got to make our public schools great. So people who are starting a business here can have a good place to educate their kids, and every kid can get a good education. Affordable housing. You want businesses to grow here and come here, they need a place where their employees can afford to live. In this state right now, we have such an affordable housing crisis that if you make nearly median income, if you make about $50,000, you can afford to buy a house in Central Falls and part of Providence, and that's it.
Right.
So we need to solve that problem. We need to make this a place where it is a great place to start a business and grow a business, not a place where it's difficult to do that, and so we're going to take money from taxpayers and give you a handout to convince you to come here. That's
Right.
not real economic development.
To what degree, when you look at cities like Providence, where they're using TIFs and they're using different types of subsidies for middle to, well, actually, higher income housing, to what degree do you feel that skews the housing market artificially away from the moderately priced housing for which there's a clear demand for?
Well, look, I mean, the focus has got to be on housing that people can afford. I mean, that's the problem that we have here. We need to be building 3 times as many houses per year as we're building now for 10 years to meet the current demand. Now, imagine if we could do this. Imagine the jobs we could create. Imagine the growth in population that we could unlock. I mean, a big part of the reason that this state's population has been stagnant or declining is because we don't have enough housing here for people to live. So think about this fact. In 1940, there were nearly 100,000 more people living in Providence than there are today. Think about how the country has grown and how Rhode Island has shrunk and then been just flat for so long, relatively shrinking compared to the rest of the country. We had a booming economy because the Industrial Revolution in North America was founded on the Blackstone River by Samuel Slater. We had a booming economy because we led. We didn't have a booming economy because of corporate subsidies. We had a booming economy because we built an economy of the future. And so that's why this state boomed for a century and a half until 70 years or so ago when the manufacturing started to leave, and nothing has replaced it ever since. So the solution for us economically to get out of stagnation and get to an economy that benefits everyone and not just those at the top is, first of all, to solve the problems that make it hard to start and run a business here, like the quality of the public schools and the affordability of housing, but also to be leaders in where the economy is going. So the 2 fastest growing parts of the American economy are, 1, clean energy. So we can't be doing what this governor has pushed for, which is building a fracked gas plant in 2018 and staying stuck in the energy economy of the 19th century of burning fossil fuels. We need to be leaders in the clean energy economy. And so I've called for having Rhode Island be the first state in the country that is fully clean energy, but not only that, the first state in the country that is exporting its surplus clean energy as a source of industry and revenue for the future and for future generations. That would create 10,000 jobs, and these could not be outsourced because they'd be tied to the landscape. So one of the fastest growing parts of the American economy is clean energy. We need to lead on that. Another one of the fastest growing parts of the American economy in the next 20 years is healthcare. And so, this governor cut Medicaid drastically. That leaves money that would be matching funds for us in Washington that don't come here. So fiscally, it makes no sense. It hurt people who depend on Medicaid. It hurt the quality of their care. People lost their care because providers shrunk, and people all of a sudden didn't have their caretaker. And I've met those people in that situation. But it also is bad economics because we had a local healthcare system. We have Brown University, which is a leading medical school. We ought to be investing in our healthcare system because it's good for the quality of care, but also because it's good for the economy. So I would restore the Medicaid funds that this governor cut, but I would also move us to the system we know we need to have eventually, which is a single payer system, which is the only one that's affordable, where everybody can get their care, where everyone has access. The issue with our system, with the private insurance system, is that the costs have gone through the roof. Nationally, and it's about the same here, the costs of healthcare have gone up 5% a year for 40 years. That is not something people can sustain. Middle class, working people, they can't take that anymore. We have 40,000 people in the state who have no health insurance at all. So this is another part of our system that is broken, and it is immoral, and it's cruel, and it's unjust. And so it needs to change. And the solution we know it from not just looking at other countries, but looking at our own country, where the most popular insurance system we have is Medicare. Where 50 million Americans have it. It's 2% overhead versus our private insurance system that's 15% overhead. Everyone's covered. So we need a Medicare for all type of system, state level, a single payer system that covers everyone, that's affordable, and that's good quality care.
See, I think you and I agree on the problem. We agree on the cause. It's probably the solution we're a little bit different on. Ultimately, I believe that the way to create, and call me Pollyannish, I'm a big fan of free market capitalism, the emphasis being on free market. It leads me to a question: what would you do with the Commerce Corporation as governor?
Well, I would end the corporate subsidies, so I don't know what role they would have. I mean, I haven't gotten as far as to look at how I might restructure some of these agencies, but I certainly would get rid of the corporate subsidies, which seems to be the primary agenda.
Right.
For the reasons I said. I mean, it's not, you talk about free market. I also believe in a free market in the sense that businesses ought to compete on their merits and not have government bureaucrats and appointees pick out certain corporations and give them handouts while every other business has to struggle on their own, especially because of the corrupting influence of money, when those same corporations and their executives are funneling money to the politicians making those decisions. So that system has to end. And we also know, there is plenty of evidence, and you've got think tanks in Washington, D.C., and all sorts of experts who have said for a long time that these corporate subsidies, these quote incentives, are not incentives at all. That corporations do not decide, that the corporation that's making tens of millions or even billions of dollars a year do not decide where to locate 100 of their employees, like what's been going on here with these corporate subsidies, based on getting a $10 million handout from a state of people who can't afford to give it to them. They base it on where there are good schools, where there are good roads, where there's good governance, where there's affordable housing, all things that are a big problem here. So let's focus on solving those problems so businesses want to start here, businesses want to come here, and they don't expect to or need to or demand a corporate handout to do it.
Right, and I'll agree with you on all of that. We might disagree on how those things happen, but having worked as a tax accountant and worked for 2 Fortune 200 companies, they also look at the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate of any individual legal entity is a huge determinant in where they go, and also the reach of that tax rate. Do they support unitary taxation? Are they exposing other elements of their portfolio to taxation by involvement in particular states? Now, some of that's changed, unfortunately, by the Supreme Court decision to engage in internet taxation. But I would argue that energy costs are a huge issue. Although I support aggressively, as long as it's free market generated, the going after alternative energies. I believe that is the long-term picture. But ultimately, right now, the effective tax rate in this neighborhood where we are is incompatible with any real business development, which is why, of course, then you got to write a check. So I agree when it comes to quality of life issues, no one who's highly placed in a Fortune 1000 company is looking to move their place. I mean, this is why GE moved to Massachusetts, overall quality of life, schools and all that. But Massachusetts has gotten more aggressive in terms of their effective tax rate. I'm a big fan of Pawtucket, yet I'm wildly opposed to the stadium. Pawtucket needs to lower its tax rate, and the only way you do that is to build a base. So you've got this chicken and egg, but how do we make taxes more affordable here in this state? How do we do it? It's got to happen.
Well, taxes have to be more fair. So what happened about 20 years ago in this state is that Rhode Island, like many states across the country and the country itself, bought into, we may part ways on this, but bought into what I believe and what I think most economists now believe is a failed theory of economics, which is trickle-down economics, that you cut and cut and cut taxes for the large corporations and the wealthy, and somehow that trickles down to communities. So Rhode Island started to cut taxes for the corporations and the wealthiest and did it for 20 years, right up through 2006, when we had a 60% tax, or sorry, 40% tax cut for the wealthiest sliver, right up through the current governor's agenda, or primary agenda, is corporate tax cuts and giveaways, and it hasn't worked. I mean, so the money didn't trickle down. This is why this is why the school buildings are crumbling. When we cut all those taxes at the top, 2 things happen. One is that we defunded our schools. So we are now bottom 5 in the country for the state funding of schools.
Okay.
The second thing that happened is that the cities and towns, the local town councils and mayors and so on, they're closer to the people. So it's harder for them to turn their backs on their own people than it is for people up here at the State House, because they see them every day, right in their communities. So they felt compelled to raise property taxes to try to make up for the lost revenue from all these tax cuts at the state level for the corporations and the wealthiest. Who do property taxes hit the hardest? The middle class.
Absolutely.
So essentially we've ended up now with a tax system that is exactly what Warren Buffett warned against, the great investor and one of the richest men in the world, warned against when he said, we shouldn't have a country where my secretary pays a higher tax rate than I do.
Right.
Well, we're now there in Rhode Island. After 20 years of slashing taxes for the corporations and the wealthiest, right up through Governor Raimondo's primary agenda of tax breaks for corporations, and the local cities and towns feeling that they gotta raise those property taxes to try to make up for it, even though there's no way to actually make up for it, which is why our school buildings are falling down. But we are now in that situation that Warren Buffett warned against, where the wealthiest people in Rhode Island are paying the lowest tax rate in the state. The school buildings are falling down. We're losing our local health care system. We're 50th out of the 50 states in the country for the education of Latino children. Show me how that money trickled down to our communities. It did not happen, right?
No.
It stayed up at the top. People have paid the price. And so we got to get rid of those. And this, by the way, then you've got the Trump tax cuts for the corporations and the wealthiest, went almost entirely to them, piled on top of all that. So we've got to cut repeal these extreme tax cuts for the wealthiest in corporations,
Right.
and get a fair tax system that does not burden the middle class more than the wealthiest people in the largest corporations.
Right.
I also think so.
Let me jump in
go
for a
ahead.
second. So I'll go with that for a second. But ultimately, a $9 billion budget for a state of arguably slightly fewer or slightly more than 1 million people. I mean, when I look at a $9 billion budget, at what point in time do we start to hold the government accountable for its simple inability to execute fundamental goods and practices and best practices for a population when they're spending $9 billion? And that doesn't even include the federal subsidies. I mean, at what point do we just start to shrink and outright cut government? I mean, you know, this governor, and I can't hold you accountable for, has gone on a hiring spree, the likes of which this state has never seen. I mean, we are now the home. I'm convinced we have more $100,000 plus project managers and more $100,000 or $80,000 plus communication people in this state at a time when we simply can't afford it. When you're right, we're not, you know, when I look at DCYF and when I look at UHEP, and then I simultaneously look at a governor, pet issue, sorry, who tried to raise an onerous tax on medical cannabis, I see a governor who's completely lost her moral bearings.
Well, here's you want to talk about waste and fraud in government. Here's one that people don't hear much about, and that is that every year we're taxed, and about $2.5 billion of our tax revenue is deposited in Wall Street banks. That's where it's parked. Mm-hmm. And those Wall Street banks leverage that money to invest all over the world, doing infrastructure projects from Asia to the Middle East and everywhere else. Mm-hmm. And they make a bundle off that. One place our $2.5 billion is not invested by those banks is here in Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. So I am proposing that we do what North Dakota did over 100 years ago that's been hugely successful for them, that 20 cities and states are now looking at doing. That the new governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy, who was a banker himself, is looking at doing in New Jersey, and he ran on this in his campaign, which is to bring that money out of the Wall Street banks, have our own state investment bank, not Commerce Corporation, mm-hmm. where it's political bureaucrats and appointees making financial decisions, real financial managers overseeing this, not picking corporations and giving them handouts, but running a investment bank where they're making loans and they're making some profit. And they would invest, they would have a mandate and a charter mm-hmm. to invest only in the Rhode Island economy and to invest in things that the big banks would not invest in. So affordable housing, clean energy, mm-hmm. small business, women-owned business, minority-owned business. All of these things that the big banks are not going to invest in. Grow jobs, grow the economy, and make a little profit. The North Dakota Bank, which operates this way, mm-hmm. now throws off every year about $35 million back to the general fund to help with whatever may be needed. This is a source of revenue in perpetuity that is not going into further debt and not raising property taxes on the middle class.
Which sounds awfully attractive, but I will tell you as someone, and I'm not from Rhode Island, as someone who's lived here going on 25, 30 years, the notion of anyone who currently exists at the high level of Rhode Island government having any type of control into that scares the crap out of me, because I simply have no faith whatsoever, I won't even say honesty, in the fundamental morality of our governor, our speaker, our Senate president. I mean, I don't know, and I'm from New Jersey. So let's put it all into relative terms. I'm from New Jersey. I grew up about 10 miles from the mythical Bada Bing from Sopranos. All right. I don't see a single elected official. I'll leave Mr. Magaziner out of it because I don't know him, and he and Nellie Gorbet occupy what I consider administrative executive level offices. But I can't trust any of them with that kind of money, and all I have to do is look back to RISDIC and see what happened there. We have a government. See, it's not in my situation. It's not the people who start the issue. It's the people who eventually graft onto it, and the Commerce Corporation is a perfect example of it. Stephen Pryor, by everyone's agreement, is probably a jolly fellow. He exemplifies tremendous personal hygiene, and all in all, is probably well loved by his family. But in no way, in God's green earth, does he or the people who work for him have the core competencies to be running what has essentially been converted into an investment banking operation.
But this is my point: is that is a situation where you have a political appointee who's not a financial management expert, not an investment expert, and who's not even investing, but is just giving the money away. We don't get it. We have no return in that. We get no return. We have no.
What's the Irish company who was going to make sandwiches?
Right.
We all got to see the ribbon cutting on that one. Funny how the media presence on that. It doesn't seem to be as being aggressively spun by the Raimondo administration, because how much money did we lose on that? NAPSIS, the steel company, 38 Stadium, 38 Studios, and that's, you see, I get it. I supremely get it. But again, there's nothing to suggest in this state that there's any trust factor. And that's part of the problem. Maybe if let's say you're elected. All right, and maybe if the state went through the cathartic process of truly understanding what happened in 38 Studios, maybe then some modicum of trust can be built. But I would just see that as a huge, and again, the concept works.
Yeah.
I get it completely.
No, but
Tell me, I sat in House Finance. I probably attended a dozen hearings this year in House Finance. And the gentleman who, by all accounts, who is the chairman of the House Finance Committee, is a gentleman, he's articulate, got tremendous experience in the United States military, and I had a fair amount of faith in him. And then I watched him, the night they passed 38 Stadium, take what was supposed to be a hearing on a bill and tell people that there would be no, I was there. This isn't hearsay, this isn't the usual being a nattering nabob of negativity. I was there. I watched him and said this was not the point of debate. The debate would be on the House floor, and took that bill, which was still literally hot off the photocopier, and watched him. I watched adults act like the buffet was closing in a Vegas casino, trying to ram through that bill in one night.
Well, let me say two things. One is what I'm talking about. There's a model for it. It's been in North Dakota. It's moving forward in New Jersey. I think Los Angeles is moving forward on. This is a model where there's independence, there's regulation, there's audits, there's oversight. This is not anything like the RISDIC thing where there was no regulation and oversight, and is a real bank run by financial managers, rather than what we have now, which is corporate handouts without any return. So that's number one. Number two, your basic underlying point here, I completely agree with, which is we need a big change in our political system in this state. We've needed it for a long time. The status quo is hurting people. You mentioned UHIP and DCYF. People were really hurt.
People are dying.
Yeah, and people were left hungry. Tens of thousands of people by this governor's failure and mismanagement with the UHIP system. In DCYF, we know the tragic results there of the mismanagement and the failure there. And so people have been hurt. People have been left hungry. Tens of thousands, including children in the state. People have lost their health care because of these problems and mismanagement by our government.
Businesses have been shuttered. We've lost, in a state that didn't have enough beds in nursing homes to begin with, we've lost beds in nursing homes.
Yeah, and so we need a change, and that's what my campaign is about. We need a big change in the state. We've needed it for a long time, as you know. I think there is a desire for change. I think people understand that human beings, that we are better than the system we've created, that the system is immoral and broken and cruel and corrupt, and we are not. And that makes people angry, but it also makes me feel like, well, people know that, they feel that.
Right.
They know what we ought to be, they know what we should be, and they know what we can be. And so we need to lay out a plan, which I'm trying to do, about how we can get there so people can believe again that change is possible. And we need to run a different kind of campaign, which is what we're doing. So I'm not taking any money from corporate PACs or lobbyists, no money from the fossil fuel industry. This is a campaign that is entirely backed and organized by and powered by the people of Rhode Island. So we did, we set out in June to do 30 events in 30 days, going to people's houses, sitting, talking with them. That's democracy. You know, the 30-second ads, I guess they have a role, but that's marketing a product. Democracy is sitting and having a conversation. We've been doing that. We set out to do 30 events in 30 days, and we ended up doing more than 40, and we're still going with it. And so this is the kind of politics we need. That's about people, that's about communities, that's about solving real problems. That's not about being with and working for the big corporations and the wealthy. It's not about doing what this governor has done, which is spending 3 out of the last 17 months out of state fundraising. It's about being here and talking to people here and solving problems here and giving people a sense that there is hope that things can change. And that's what I've been hearing from people around the state. People believing like, you know what? I don't want to give up. I want to get involved in this, and I do believe that we can change things, and people are getting behind this.
A couple of quick questions. Should the governor have vetoed the opioid bill?
Which bill you're
This
talking
is the opioid murder bill.
Yes, you should have. Yeah, this bill of that you're referring to would do nothing to solve the problem. In fact, it could be very dangerous. It could deter people from making a phone call if someone is ill. And as we know, the mass incarceration approach to the war on drugs has failed to solve the problem, has been immoral and unjust.
Right. Now, you and I agree on, we're in lockstep on that.
And I called on her to veto it, and I wish she had.
No. Should the governor have signed the stadium bill?
No. You know, first of all, across the board, I don't support corporate subsidies. That's not how the free market works. It doesn't work. It's not fair to all the other businesses. We don't have that. That's not the way to build a sustained economy. We need to build a real economy. We can't build it based on individual handouts to corporations. Secondly, when this whole discussion started a few years ago, as you recall, the whole idea was that these owners were local boys who made good in business and who had a bunch of money, and they were going to do something good for their state. And they said they were going to pay to build the stadium. And how that deal turned into, several years later, the people of this state being on the hook for that stadium is, I think, yet another example of this governor's failed negotiating skills, that we end up paying the bills for all these things. They offered, that was their whole idea, was that it was great to have local ownership of this local treasure that we all love, and they were going to build it, and somehow we ended up getting stuck with the bill. And you know, the governor said just a year or so ago, I won't support any deal where the taxpayers are left on the hook. The latest deal came out, and she said on the radio, this deal would leave taxpayers on the hook, essentially. She acknowledged that, but then she signed the bill. So she went back on her promise not to support that kind of deal. So I think in this case it's wrong, but I think just we got to move beyond the corporate subsidy. It's not going to work. It's not real economic development. We got to invest in the future in healthcare and clean energy. We got to solve our housing crisis. We got to solve our schools crisis. So this is a place where people want to and can build businesses over the long term, not that they expect to be paid by the taxpayers to do it.
Right. Casino gaming is a significant part of the Rhode Island budget. There's a couple ways that you can look ill at that. Number one, there's a constituency that considers that just to be simply immoral. The notion that we're chasing people, using everything, as my prior guest pointed, from neurological studies to drive this new video-based gaming to simply a lack of information. And this will sound elitist, but quite frankly, a lack of education. Is it too late for us to get away from a gaming economy here in the state?
Well, we need to build the alternative. I mean, so we have an economy that has essentially been stagnant for about 70 years since the manufacturing started to leave. And as I said before, that was a booming economy. There were almost 100,000 more people living in Providence in 1940 than today. That's a shocking fact of stagnation and decline for a long time. That's why people in this state are so angry about their government. It's not been 10 years or 20 years. It's been 70 years of decline and stagnation, and nobody's done a darn thing about it at the political level. So that's where the frustration comes from, and we're not going to solve it with piecemeal projects and with corporate handouts. We're going to solve it by doing what gave us the booming economy back in the previous century, which is bold investments in the future, clean energy and healthcare, and solving this the crisis of communities that we have, which is that they're just not livable. The housing isn't affordable, and the public schools can't provide all the kids a good education. So we've got to do all those things, and that's going to take leadership. It's going to take a new a new approach. It's going to take being bold again and not incrementalist. Look, the Democratic Party was the party that said, we're going to send a man to walk on the moon in 10 years, and we did it.
Right.
We ought to be able to build a strong economy in our little state here. We've got great people, we've got great culture, we've got great communities, but we're just thinking small, and the political system is corrupted by the money, so they're not even trying to do that. They're trying to do whatever they need to do for the corporations and the wealthiest so that they can get those campaign contributions. That kind of politics has to be over. That kind of establishment politics has to be over. We got to get back to real democracy, small d, demos, that it's for the people, it's of the people, it's by the people. And that's what we're trying to do with this campaign. And I believe we can do it. I believe the people want it. We've got huge enthusiasm around the state, and we're going to keep pushing until we get there.
The last question, and I'm grateful for you taking the time to come in tonight. Independent media, quite frankly, you're obviously familiar with people like Steve Alquist. Independent media in this state, quite frankly, is what's going to lead this state in terms of coverage, in terms of questioning, in terms of thought, out of this miasma that we're in. But it strikes me right now, particularly the events of the last week or two, that the Democratic Party is in a state of, I'll call it a collective nervous breakdown. It's fractured, in my statement, not yours, it's fractured largely into a progressive wing and into the sort of statist old guard desperately hanging on to power. The challenge for any governor in a state where the governor is arguably constitutionally weak, yet at the same time, if they were to display courage, could rally a bully pulpit, but clearly they're going to need the support of the General Assembly to make these type of wholesale changes. Do you think it's possible in this election or the upcoming election or two to continue to evolve or really devolve the General Assembly so that they'd be willing to walk along with you?
Well, look, I mean, walk along with me in terms of my vision. Yeah, look, change, as you know, we are in a period in this state, like in many parts of the country, where people are pushing very hard for change, where there's a broad consensus that the system that we have has failed. The economic system and the corruption of the political system by money has failed people. There is a desire for change like I haven't seen in a long time, and I've spent my whole life working for change in different communities in different ways. But there is a demand for change right now, and it is broad. It is. I would just say that this is about not people of this political persuasion or that political persuasion pitted against each other. I would say this is the people against the establishment. Right. This is the people against corporate power, the people against money. The broad public has had it with this system. They know it has failed them, and they want change. And I think we have a broad base of support for that. And of course, we're going to start to see that reflected in the legislature because they're elected by their constituencies. We've already started to see some change in the legislature. And I love what I'm seeing with these young people coming up who are fighting for their values, and we need to support them, and we need to find more like them.
Well, I appreciate you coming in today. You've got a great perspective. I mean, again, you and I probably arrive at similar places via different vehicles, but again, I respect your willingness to kind of bring it to the people. We've got a governor who I believe is clearly in hiding. She's hiding behind these, I'll project this, you don't have to, but she's hiding behind an army of paid flacks so that she does not have to suffer the slings and arrows of fate or any of the hard questions that really she refuses to answer. And I think that's the ultimate insult to the Rhode Island taxpayer at this point, because we have a legal system in collapse, we've got a healthcare system in collapse, we've got millions, untold millions, being sent out to out-of-state corporations. The schools are a mess, and at the same time, there's little or no transparency, whether it be road works or the proposed school bonding, in terms of how the money's going to be spent. There's a diffidence and a learned, studied ignorance of what's important here that is really just it's insulting. You're right; it needs to change. So I wish you nothing but the best. I hope you'll join us again as the campaign transpires. It's an open door here. Feel free, if you've got issues that you want to bring to a segment of the population that you might not naturally meet through a grassroots Democratic campaign, feel free to bring them here, because there's probably no better place. I'll tell you the story I told it briefly earlier today. My feelings about Governor Raimondo are rooted firmly, despite all the issues with the stadium, the subsidies. There was a cold winter's day a couple years ago where I stood on the State House steps and I was privileged to stand amongst the people from RICARES and people who were members of the medical cannabis community. And a number of those people who stood with me on that cold day are no longer with us. They passed away. A number of those people were in the stages of advanced neuromuscular diseases or second, third, in some cases, late stages cancer. And we have a governor and a government who, in their own cheery sort of manner, found it perfectly appropriate to propose a large-scale tax on the sick and dying. And I sat there for 2 hours in that hearing, and I listened to, the Attorney General's office speak, the Ms. Scott from the Health Department, the state police, representatives from the governor herself. God forbid she should have made it down there. And as I said earlier tonight, what was astonishing to me, and I still have the tape of the testimony, 2.5 hours into it, I was the first person to use the word patient. And why I wish you nothing but the best, even though we disagree on some economic issues, is that it is clear to me, and I hope I'm not putting you in a difficult position with this, but it is clear to me that we have a governor and a government right now that is amoral and incapable of basic human empathy. And whether it be DCYF or the tax on cannabis, the crumbling schools, all of that, regardless of how you feel about fundamental economics, that one basic fact has to change. Anything else after that is possible. We've got great people, smart people. We've got all the benefits of the world here. We're 30 miles away from the beginnings of one of the hottest economies on earth. But until we replace that fundamentally amoral government that's in place right now, we won't be able to get past that. So that's why I wish you nothing but the best. All right, Matt Brown joining us here on the Coalition. Folks, we're going to bring you this evening to a close. It's been a wonderful evening. A big thanks to Paul Roselli, without whom this evening would not have been possible. As we like to say, we are the Coalition, loud and proud. We are, as always, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live here on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network at the GoLocalLive Broadcast Center, 90 Boston Street, in the heart of the city that we so desperately love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, the all apolitical, all anti-billionaires baseball boys club Twitter feed at Pawtucket is home, and of course the mothership coalitionradio.us, where there exist links and downloads to this and all of the shows, which will live in perpetuity. Matt Brown, tell us where folks can find you on the web.
MattBrownForGovernor.com is the website.
Governor.com, where they can also contribute.
They can also contribute. Donate button right there. And we want people to contribute because we're not taking all the big money from the corporate PACs and lobbyists and the fossil fuel industry. So this is a campaign supported by the people. So yeah, come on in and support us. Contribution, volunteer, whatever you can do to help.
Yeah, I'm impressed by. Somehow I managed to be on a couple of your mailing lists,
Okay.
and I won't tell you. I won't tell you the emails.
Okay.
I'm impressed by the grassroots, widespread grassroots nature of your support.
Well, appreciate that.
Yeah, and folks willing work. I've been getting some of the invites for people willing to open up their homes for a gubernatorial candidate, also a gubernatorial candidate who's willing to spend time in people's homes. So stay in touch. You have any big events coming up, or are you going to continue that? Where can we see you next in terms of larger events?
We have events going all the time, all over the place, all over the state. So you can check the website and come out and see us.
And the last question for the night: will you be debating Governor Raimondo?
As much as possible.
Do you think she will? When will she assent to a debate? Because regardless of how you feel, what side of the political aisle you're on, I think we need to demand that she engage in as many debates as possible. Has that been offered yet, or is that still in the talking stages?
I think we're getting there, but I agree. I mean, this is democracy. You need to go out and make your case and share your ideas and get the feedback, and also, by the way, get other people's ideas. Any one person who says that they've got all the ideas isn't telling you the truth. So we, that's what we do at all these house parties. I don't just tell people what I think. I also listen to what they think. But debates is certainly a critical part of it, and we need to do as many as possible.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Folks, have a great night. Please, our hashtag is Take It Personally. We're going to try and get this interview up as soon as possible onto the website. We'll see you next week. Have a great